as excited as I'm sure this is for Sean to just watch me fumble around, well, let's actually bring him on to talk about the thing he wants to talk about that I wanted to have him on the show. Sean, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Let's before we get into it, let's really make sure everybody hear Sean. Sean, just read your resume for everybody so we can test the sound.
Sure. So I'm the founder of Privacy Lab. That's an initiative of the Information Society Project at Yale Law School. I've lectured at Yale Law School in cybersecurity. I've got about 2 decades of sysadmin development, techie work. And right now I'm the advisor for PanQuake.com on privacy, cybersecurity, trust, and all of those cool issues.
All right, good. You can hear Sean. Sweet. All right. All right, everybody, please hit the like button. As I said, after I talk with Sean, I will answer all of your tips on rockfin.com. And also, if you want to go to Venmo at Graham-L, all those links are streaming below me. They're scrolling across. So we'll talk to Sean for a little bit, and then I'll answer all of your questions. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Political Vigilante. My name is Graham Elwood. As many of you know, for those of you who don't, February 1st, a little over 2 weeks ago, I was completely demonetized by the good people at StalinTube. You might know them as YouTube. They have, I cannot earn any money any way, shape, or form. My 2,200 plus videos are all demonetized. YouTube is, you can still watch them. YouTube is still profiting from their algorithm of having my content on their platform, but I can't make any money from the super chats during the live stream. YouTube premiums members watching my videos, normally you would get paid with that. I don't get that money, and of course none of the ad revenue. So we've been talking about this for about 2 weeks about what some of the solutions are, and we had Susie Dawson on a couple days after it had happened, and we were talking about PanQuake.com. I've discussed that at great length on this show, and I wanted to bring more people involved in that. So we're lucky to have Sean O'Brien here, who is an advisor to PanQuake and has really worked quite extensively in privacy and all of that. So Sean, first of all, thank you for joining us on the show today, and tell us, because I'm sure you're aware of it. I mean, there was about 10 or some shows that all got wiped out within the first 3 days of February, like February 1st through the 4th, 3rd or 4th. All these shows got wiped out. Some of them have been put back on, but then I'm even hearing like Jamarl Thomas, they demonetized him, they remonetized him, and then they demonetized him again. So, I mean, tell us first of all how, I mean, you have obviously, you and Susie, and I know Bill Binney is working on PanQuake. You all have been paying close attention to this censorship and these big tech companies, basically these unelected tech billionaires kind of doing whatever they want. Tell us like what you've seen the last couple of years, like leading up to all of this stuff, and how it's getting worse. And then also what your involvement with PanQuake is, and how that's a solution.
Sure. So I think your viewership certainly knows that the amount of censorship that is happening across the big tech platforms, the Facebooks, the Twitters, the YouTubes, all of these platforms is increasing, right? And the internet that we know that has done so well in spreading information around the world, that has allowed people to collaborate in ways that they have never collaborated before, that has created new mediums, right? Podcasts and these kinds of shows. That internet is changing pretty rapidly. So PanQuake.com is our answer to that, to try to replace that messed up sort of world with something different. There are other products doing that as well, and you're using some of them. Our approach is going to be one that's based on very strong concepts of trust, privacy, and most importantly to me, I think respect. We're really, really planning into the basic design of the network, principles and concepts around respecting the user, not manipulating the user, right? Not shoving content into the user's face, not trying to create these feeds with timelines that are generated with who knows what. making sure that moderation is really transparent, and that auditing of the blockchain, for example, can be done by third parties. And that's a huge, bold move. So I'm really excited about it. And I think now is definitely the time for it. So.
Yeah, so let's go into that some of the blockchain stuff specifically, because I kind of understand it. I mean, I understand its value for sure, but describe for us when you say third party, transparency for the blockchain. Explain what that means and how it's different than the kind of behind closed doors of a Twitter or a Facebook.
Sure. So one of the central problems with having all of these intermediaries on our big internet, right? Whether they were smaller, which they were, a few years ago, or now, of course, there's these massive companies we call big tech. Those intermediaries are unaccountable, right? We don't know what they're doing on the back end. We don't know how they keep their databases. People get shadow banned, content gets manipulated, and so on. Blockchain is a concept where you can verify information.
John, you cut out for a sec. We lost your sound.
Can you hear me? Okay, hold on.
Can everybody hear him, or is it just me? Go ahead, Sean.
Okay, I don't want to play with settings. Are we good?
I think we are. Kate, was everyone hearing him fine, or was it just me? The sound is fine. Okay. So it was just my happy. Sorry, Sean.
Well, you got to need to hear me too. Anyway.
It is important. I can't just nod and go, that sounds interesting. I do need to know what you're saying.
This is for authenticity, right? This is
I don't just be like some entertainment reporter going, "Oh, that sounds great," and I don't even know or care what you're talking about. So that would be really weird. But
I appreciate it. So anyway,
yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, back to the technical stuff. So blockchain is this word that's thrown around, right? And it's obviously a big part of, pitches for all these, startups and so on. When we're talking about blockchain, we mean a distributed ledger, right? So think of it like a big spreadsheet or a big database of all of the interaction that's going on in the network. So the posts, which we're calling quakes, the interactions between users, the upvoting, downvoting, whatever mechanisms we come up with for all of that, that's going to be kept in a record. And then that record is distributed, right? The ledger ends up in the hands of many different servers spread around the world. And that's why we call it decentralized. By not having this centralized structure, it allows for that blockchain, for that record to be verified. And for example, if there is moderation, and there will be some moderation on some, but at least that moderation will be auditable. We will know why that interaction occurs. It will be annotated in the blockchain. And we care about free expression. We care about sharing. We care about access to information. So the idea is to be as minimal and as hands-off as possible in those areas. So it's a bit like resurrecting the old good internet that we know, bringing it into the 21st century, learning lessons from all of these, problematic networks, not just the big tech ones, but some of the other alternative networks that have sort of come before, learning all those lessons and really updating the good part of this worldwide collaborative platform that we used to have and bringing it into the 21st century.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important because, right now you can just say a tweet, whatever, it disappeared, or why didn't it get more likes or follows, and we have no. It's just behind Twitter's closed doors, and that's that. Whereas now you're saying we can see why. I can say, hey, what happened to that post I put on PanQuake? You can say, well, you violated these guidelines, and this is why we took it down. But I'm guessing you guys will just be enforcing real flagrant stuff, like you're saying doxing. If I just put someone's phone number out there and say, hey, everybody call this person, or I say, I want to go get this person or whatever, which is not protected speech. I think a lot of people misunderstand that. I can say I don't like you, I can say I hope you die, but if I say I'm going to get you or kill you or hurt you, or hey, everyone go hurt this person, that's not protected speech. Those would be the things. And you can say, and so even if you guys took me down and I made the claim, wow, PanQuake was censoring me, you can go, nope, here's
Right.
Here's the open source technology that lives on all these servers rather than behind closed doors somewhere in Silicon Valley, which is really valuable. And I think, like you said, it just already has an inherent trust factor to it, because we all kind of don't trust big tech. And especially since the social dilemma has come out, that's pretty alarming, although they kind of skip over the fact that the data collection is used for the intelligence community. They just make it seem like advertisers. Oh, darn it, Clorox. It's like, no, it's the CIA. But so let's talk about that.
Sure. So I don't want to focus too much on moderation because I'm not sure what the policies will be, but I'm glad you bring up these other aspects. We're going to have a real worldwide community, right? We don't have investors behind the product. We're going to have folks like myself, like Bill Binney and so on, who have a good reputation for caring about free expression, free speech, obviously defending information. I mean, the guy's an NSA whistleblower, right? Cares very much about making sure that the public good, right? The public has the information they need to act. And what you bring up is quite correct. Although the advertising technology and sort of the data economy is the primary engine of these networks, we certainly have intelligence agencies hooked up into that world, and nearly every aspect of the technology we have. Part of the reason to be decentralized, to not have some shady investors in the background and be transparent about the entire, sort of structure of the organization, and to make it, possible for people to audit us. The reason we want that kind of scrutiny, which, is a bold move, is because we want to be able to say, hey, we don't have the NSA in here, right? We don't have any infiltration from these organizations. You can trust us because we put all of our cards on the table, basically. So.
Yeah, that's what's fantastic. I mean, when Susie first told me about this, I said, yeah, it's a great idea. And then when she said Bill Binney wants to be involved, I was like, well, that's the person you want, because he's going to know all of the tactics that the intelligence community is going to use to try to buy out, hijack, infiltrate, whatever. I mean, can you go into some of the specifics of how you're going to be able to prevent that? Are you?
Yeah, so I mean, it's not even so much trying to, hide anything at this point, but I'm not sure exactly what the development choices will be, but I can talk a little bit in sort of broad strokes about it, right? So we're going to have multiple servers that also are clients, right? So a real peer-to-peer structure, like, traditional file sharing networks. The users will play some role in that network as peers on the network, sharing data with other peers, right? This is a good way to get around censorship as well. So if you have some country try to shut it down, you're sending information in such a way that you can now sort of daisy chain through another part of the network and route around that censorship, right? Sort of heal the connection. But also, we're going to be using some sort of really cool encryption that Bill Binney is working on, it's stuff that they use, of course, inside these agencies, because they have folks all around the world who are trying to connect to each other. We're going to use it for a positive good, of course, and that sort of multi-layered encryption is going to mean that the servers are swapping between each other, right? As the network is operating, there's verification that's going on constantly. So if you have nodes, right, computers on the network that are trying to do something malicious, there are ways to verify and double check that the activity that those computers are doing is, correct and the kind of activity we want happening. So it's similar to networks that you may be familiar with, that are doing anonymity, that are doing, peer-to-peer networks for things like file sharing, but we're applying those kinds of concepts to social networking on a broad scale, really for the first time. So,
wow.
Stuff,
and
right?
then, I'm trying to think like, somebody's asked in the chat, can you use a VPN to use this? Which I think it just means you can use a VPN on to access any website, because I guess that's, as you say, like certain countries might want to block it or not give access to it. So is that what, I mean, would a VPN be a part of that? The way like everybody in China, I was in China, everybody had a VPN to go access all the websites that the Chinese government won't allow them to go to.
Sure. So a VPN plays one role in obscuring your identity when you're using a network, right? So if I'm in Australia right now and I want to get news out of Facebook, I might want to pretend I'm not from Australia, right? So I would use a VPN to pretend I'm from somewhere else and to route my traffic basically through another server somewhere. That's the reason everybody's using it in China to get around the Great Firewall and so on and so forth. And if it's a trustworthy VPN, you have an encrypted connection there, right? You have a verifiable, trustworthy way to send information without somebody snooping on that connection. Again, trust is a big part of the equation here. So that's what a VPN does. Certainly, VPN can be used for PanQuake.com, but we are trying to build in things that will basically make it difficult for censorship to happen in the design of the network. For example, we're talking about potentially using something called domain fronting, which is similar to what networks like the Tor network and so on use, to make it difficult for a country or an ISP or some organization like your university, let's say, to figure out what you're requesting. Right. So if PanQuake.com gets banned somewhere, we make it difficult for the folks who are banning PanQuake.com to figure out that that's the traffic you're requesting. So in that way, it's similar to a VPN. VPNs are cool. I'm glad people are using them. It means that people care about privacy, right? But they're just one little aspect, unfortunately. And it also would create some vulnerabilities for us if we just sort of base the network architecture around those point-to-point sort of VPN-like networks. There are other folks who are doing that, and more power to them, but we're thinking of something that's a bit more massive, a bit more distributed. You can think of it more like a bunch of mirrored websites, right? So if you have thousands of copies of PanQuake.com all over the place, and a user goes and requests from one server instead of another server, and maybe that server is their friend around the block, right? There are ways to do routing that you can make sure the availability of the information is going to be there, that the integrity of the connection is still there, right? And then we still have that confidentiality for the connection as well. So yeah, we're trying. We're going to do some awesome stuff. Of course, there's going to be a alpha, beta kind of testing release, which is why I can't give you real specifics exactly what we're doing. But again, we have a lot of examples to build from. We have a lot of talented folks. I just spent a couple hours with one of the main developers today talking about some of these issues and how we're going to do our peer connections and so on. And I'm excited about it. And I have a lot of experience in this area. So I hope when we start building on those things, we get community feedback. We get the geeks who are really interested in digging into this stuff. And we love to listen to that feedback. So.
Yeah, that's really, I really like the transparency aspect of this. And how did you, I mean, has anything sort of happened to you on a personal level that made you want to get more involved with something like this?
Oh, geez. Well, I get upset when I hear your story. I didn't realize that the demonetization was so bad in your channel. And obviously it's happening everywhere. I should not be surprised. But of course, I've been looking at this social problem, the social dilemma for a long time. I got into social media very early. My university was one of the first ones to have Facebook. And of course, we were all on MySpace and et cetera before that. If you recall, which I'm sure you do, there were tons of different social networks that were being pushed at the same time. But what I saw when I was working, and I was a web developer and system administrator at the time at a university, I was really seeing these social media sites sort of swallowing up communities and building walls around them. That's what some folks call walled garden, right? The approach that AOL, let's say, was using in the 90s, but sort of reborn in these new social networks. And Facebook was a very obvious, very atrocious example of that, I was worried about pretty early on. So believe it or not, I was actually playing with these alternative replacement networks back then. I ran some pretty small nodes, but respectable for the time, with tens of thousands of users of alternative social networks. And those were federated. They were talking to other networks, and we had people using them. What I saw as an admin of those networks are some of the problems that are harder to solve, that can't be solved just by a technological approach, right? Have to be solved by governance models and thinking about trust and thinking about ways to not manipulate your users. So I would see interaction on the network where people were being creeps, right? and maybe I'd see bots, or I'd see some sort of manipulation in someone's feed. I saw interfaces, the user interface that's just not very conducive to real communication and collaboration and spreading of thought, right? Having a conversation. And that kind of stuff, alarmed me a little bit. I guess I should say a lot. So I got out of the game of basically hosting my own little mini social network, and sort of gave up on it a little while, right? Kept, of course, being worried about the Facebooks and the Twitters and the growth of all that. But I was like, yeah, I'm not sure these replacements are really going to do what they say they're going to do. This project excites me because it's starting from a place of real serious understanding, right? We're not saying, hey, we're going to take Twitter, clone it out, and just because we're so much better and so much cooler than Twitter, we're going to make a better Twitter, right? We're really saying we need to rethink the model, take what was good about the old internet that we love and cherish so much, that allowed people to freely speak and freely communicate, and build on top of that. So yeah, personal stories, I don't know. I've had a lot of strange stuff go on on the internet in my own life. I do definitely see, for example, a lot of my users on Twitter suddenly evaporate, hundreds overnight, potentially thousands. I don't keep track very well, and I only have a sort of respectable following. So when I see 4,000 go down to 2,000, it's kind of a big deal. It's a mix of things, I'm sure. It's both shadow banning of folks who are speaking too loudly, maybe on a certain issue, or have an opinion that Twitter doesn't like or has flagged for some reason. And I'm sure there's also some bot accounts and things like that that are following me. One of the things we're going to try to do with PanQuake.com that I think we're going to be very successful doing is, disincentivizing that type of activity. One of the ways you do that is by having a subscription fee, a nice flat fee, $5 a month. You're not going to encourage people to just spin up thousands of accounts to have bots to manipulate the network there. And what is the manipulation they can get away with anyway? We don't have advertising, right? We're not surveilling users. We're not building these shadow profiles on users so that we can recommend, Joe to Susie to Sean, right? If you're not doing that, there's really not a good reason to have that sort of manipulation occurring. So yeah, I guess personal stories, I don't have a real, thankfully, terrible thing that's happened to me in my life. But of course, I know plenty of folks who have been stalked and et cetera. Clubhouse, this is happening with. It's a great new example. Well, not great, but it's a good example of how things can go awry with these new platforms, because Clubhouse basically shares your contacts whether you wanted to or not when you sign up for it. There's a number of stories of folks that I know personally who, had been blocking someone or had been, trying to make sure that they're not getting texts and calls and so on from someone. And all of a sudden that person knows who they are in Clubhouse. So yeah. There's some pretty atrocious stuff that happens to others, but I've been pretty lucky. So,
yeah, that's crazy. I mean, and to clarify here, one of the reasons of people like, oh, I don't want to pay a subscription fee, which I understand. Like, there's a million, we could all be subscribing to a million things, and it starts to add up. But I want to just make it clear. One of the things, as you said, without a subscription fee, free to sign up, then people can do all the bots. So $5 a month discourages bots. It also, to run the operation of any any social media, you need funds. And if you would go free and allow advertisers, then the advertisers can sway how it's going to go. I mean, that's part of what's happening at YouTube is they use the advertisers as a like, oh, it's I mean, I was demonetized for harmful content, right?
Right.
Oh, it's bad for our advertisers. Well, what does that mean? They gave me nothing. It's vague. They can say whatever they want. They can just kick me off for all these kind of vague, arbitrary reasons, and they're deliberately vague wording of their terms of service. So that gives them broad powers to just, it's like the Patriot Act, like, oh, terrorism. But what? But how? Well, terrorism. So we can just, we can put you on a no-fly list. We can do whatever. And you're just terrorism. And so that's why this is important, because that's how the service is paid for itself. You can't put in bots there, and then getting rid of advertisers. And then, as you said, because it's open source, you can't just sell the data to the intelligence communities either.
Right. And if going further than that, we want to know as little about our users as possible. Right. And we're coming up with new ways, of course, to do these kinds of signups. Folks who donate, go to PanQuake.com, donate to the project right now. They can get an access code to get in later. Right. And that's not tied to their donation information. We're purposefully trying to come up with ways where our user information is sort of kept in a siloed and compartmentalized way. We don't want those profiles. We don't want to know who's interacting with who. We want the thing to work, right? But we can build, thankfully, we have mathematics for that. We have encryption, which allows us to verify things, right? Make sure that content is flowing the way it's supposed to flow. And we can do all that on a technical level without having to peer into people's lives. But I do want to also mention, beyond the subscription fee, we will have like good Samaritan accounts, so that folks will be able to give to their friends. We don't know exactly what that mechanism is going to be, but we definitely know, and we've heard loud and clear from folks, everybody's hurting right now, or except for the billionaires and trillionaires. But the people who are going to be in our network are, folks who, $5 can be a big deal. And we want to make sure that low-income folks who are out of work, folks who are in, the global south and bad situations, that they're going to be able to get into the network if they need to. So that's going to be a part of it. The race to the bottom of, all of these other platforms is a thing that we want to avoid. So you correctly identify that the profit model for the internet and for these other platforms is through advertising and surveillance, which are sort of closely interwoven. You can't run a platform the way big tech runs platforms, without surveilling your users. What they've basically done is convinced a large part of the rest of the economy to give them massive piles of cash, because they say they can surveil people the best and they can do the best insights on users, So if you're Ford and you want to sell cars, now you're going to have to dump a lot of cash into Google, because they've created a world where you pretty much can't if you want to reach users at all. And Google will tell you how successful those ads are. They get to be the people who control the market, right? And then, set the prices and so on. And then also, right, are the ones who are making it impossible for anything else to exist. So having a subscription fee is a way of saying, hey, we're transparent about where the money's coming from. We have a relationship with you as a customer. And then, you pay for this, you get this service, and we're not spying on you. So
yeah, we're not spying on you. Well, Sean, I really appreciate you explaining this to our audience and everything. And, letting people know that there's like safeguards in there to where, all of the questions that people would have going into something like this, and the trust issues that you're building them up from a technological standpoint. And then also that people can gift subscriptions to somebody. If there's anybody out there that, can't afford the $5 a month, like you say, there's a lot of people out there hurting right now because of the pandemic. So I think that's awesome. And, I really feel personally like this is an important time to do this. I mean, thankfully I'm simulcasting this live stream at Rockfin, and I put all my videos up there, but I see how this could go. I mean, they could completely deplatform me. Then they could pull me off of Twitter. And then how do I tell my audience that I'm live? How do I tell my audience I've got new videos? How do I do that? Because YouTube, I've got 78,000 subscribers. I've got 35 or some thousand Twitter followers. And those are the two. That's why I use Twitter I'm on Facebook and Instagram or whatever, but I use Twitter to promote my videos and that I'm live. And so I really see, and it's very clear there's censorship of me specifically, but everybody, it was a bunch of lefty shows they took out 2 weeks ago. Right. They took out a lot of right-wing shows after January 6th at the Capitol, but they took out a bunch of lefty people 2 weeks ago. And even talking to some of my indie media friends, they're like, I'm going to pull down this video, and it's working. The self-censorship. Now everybody's afraid that the hammer's going to drop. So they're just self-censoring.
That's the chilling effect, right? So we have to be careful what we wish for. Folks who are, appalled at one thing or another, wanting it to be censored, wanting it to be removed, they're asking for it themselves, right? That stuff definitely has blowback across the political spectrum. And one of the things, of course, you see very commonly is that the knee-jerk reaction is, well, we have to remove this thing. It's too appalling. It's causing all these problems. It's, whatever. It's a state actor doing this, whatever the theories are behind it. Folks who are on the left are going to be burned just like folks who are on the right. And we're definitely seeing that. But you're part of a disruptive, cycle of information flow. And just to clarify that a little bit, this middle part of the lifespan of the internet that we're in right now, content creators like you have had, broad access to an audience. And what's going on is the folks who are in power, who are able to clamp down on that information system, are going to do it and take that power away from folks like you. We have to build grassroots alternatives that are going to keep the gates as wide open as we possibly can. We have to make sure we're allowing folks to monetize, right, and deliver content. So we're going to work on that too. I can't talk about specifics of that yet either, but we are definitely going to have some sort of monetization mechanism built into PanQuake.com. We want content creators to be speaking as loudly as possible, delivering to an audience as wide as possible. That's a danger, to real serious folks who are billionaires, trillionaires, running powerful parts of the society that we're in. And if we're going to see real change in the world, if we're going to see, equity and these kinds of things, the information system is extremely key because, as you know, if these voices are shut down, then folks can't even hear or think about new ideas. So, not to be too dramatic about it, but our supporters have been calling PanQuake.com a lifeboat. And I definitely think that analogy is correct. But I also think that a more apt analogy is probably an ark. The flood is coming, and we're starting to see the beginnings of it now. We're starting to see state actors shutting down their little corner of the internet and creating specific rules for it, trying to silo off their populations from information in a way that's never happened before. We're seeing folks locked into these platforms, locked into a specific model of smartphone and a specific app on that smartphone. And if we don't sort of take what we have now, preserve it, cherish it, and expand outward, right? Build real, as I said, lifeboats, arcs, whatever you want the analogy to be, but ways for content creators like you to bring their message elsewhere, then we're in serious trouble because YouTube ain't it. Twitter ain't it. Who knows what's going to happen to these platforms, but I guess ironically, or maybe not ironically, Twitter, as you may have seen, is talking about subscription models. So it'll be interesting.
Oh, weird that they suddenly came up with that model when you guys started raising all your money and everything. But yeah, so let's before you go, I know you guys hit your first marker of like $50,000, and you're trying to get to your second one because the sooner you get to that model or that number for your fundraising, the sooner like people can get hired and work full time to implement this. Because I think the clock is ticking. Because you see Twitter in implementing a subscription model. You saw the bloodletting on YouTube 2 weeks ago. So they're really, the ruling elites and the intelligence community are trying to, round up this last corner of free speech, which is the internet. They control the other media, and not just news, but they control. I've worked in Hollywood for 20 some years. They control that. And they do this other forms of censorship, like true left-wing comedians like myself, Lee Camp, Jimmy Dore. They're not giving us comedy specials on Netflix. If we talk about getting drunk and high and trying to get laid, yes, we'll get Netflix specials. So it's really what PanQuake and I would add to that Rockfin are is like, not just indie media shows like this one, and not just being able to post stuff on Twitter, but like real interesting stories and points of view that you just cannot find. I mean, music, whatever. Like, there's no social commentary. There's no real political or social commentary coming out of the record industry, coming out of Hollywood. There's nothing. It's all just like war, American exceptionalism, and how to keep us divided, distracted, and afraid. So I'm glad you all are working on this. So tell people again, like, where to go donate and what you need, and the timeline and everything.
Sure. So panquake.com, go out there. There's all the information you need to donate. The fundraiser is being done through Go Get Funding. So you can go out there, Go Get Funding/PanQuake, and donate there as well. One of the bold moves that Susie is very much both very smart about, but also, it's bold, is spending the money that people are donating on, as you say, full-time work. We want folks developing now, building now, and being able to do this as their day job instead of sort of a hobby, so that we can roll this thing out. And that means, of course, the donations have to keep flowing. So supporting that, helping us build that, I think is going to be really key as we keep moving. You mentioned Hollywood, you mentioned comedians, and so on. Comedy is extremely important, but the thing that's most interesting to me about all of this is that the comedians are the only ones, or seem to be the only ones, who get through at all, with a lot of this, because they're still sort of, well, they're a clown or something, right? But I guess systems of power are starting to realize that that's not the case, right? That you really do reach people by both having a bit of a sense of humor and being able to deliver real information. And we have to cherish that. We have to cherish comedy alongside, serious philosophical discussions and serious political discussions, alongside music and art and all these other things. Ultimately, this is about freedom of thought, as well as about freedom of expression, right? It's not just about talking. It's about being able to hear what other people say, think about it, process that information, and then, build your own new world, basically. So we want to help with that, and I hope you can support us. So,
Sean O'Brien, thank you so much for taking time out for your day to explain this to us. Everybody, please go to panquake.com, give what you can, even if money's tight, a couple of bucks, and share it on your social media, so that they can get this funded and get this built, so that we can all be using it by the summer, which would be fantastic. So, Sean, thanks again for being on the show.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
All right, man. We'll see you soon.